carved images. That is the title of today's message. We are continuing in our series, God Bound. We're learning about the covenant of God, the covenant that God made with his people through the lens of the Old Testament, through the story of Moses and the Israelites who experienced a miraculous deliverance by the mighty hand of God. And we are learning that that's how God binds himself to his people, rescues them, draws them close to his heart, and tells them who they are, and God shows them what kind of people they're going to be. So the way we are understanding the God bound is we're understanding the covenant of God is how God binds himself to his people and how now they are bound for an eternal destiny. The work of God is a result of his mighty power out of his goodness for his glory that does not require any of our contributions or our decisions. It is something that God does based upon his sovereign will and out of his sheer grace and for his good pleasure. It is everything that he does. And our faith in God is seeing who God is, and it is our response to this God in personal ways that affects all of our life, beginning today, that continues forever. In our story, in the book of Exodus, we have just arrived at the Ten Commandments. However, last week, as we introduced this section of the book of Exodus, we learned that they are actually called the 10 words, or Decalogue. Deca means 10, log means word. That's the Latin form of the 10 Commandments, the Decalogue. That's the original language in Hebrew. These 10 words are not just a to-do list that often turns many religious people into legalistic and moralistic, holier than thou, I'm better than you, my church is better than you, my denomination is better than you, or my faith is superior than yours type of people, and that is not the intention. So if any one of us feel like that, today is a good time for us to repent. Or this whole series is an invitation for you to really take a look at the Ten Commandments and understand that's not the intention. The Ten Commandments is not given by God for us to implement in our lives and see how you and I perform and how we achieve moral excellence so that we feel good about ourselves and judge others who are bad. And unfortunately, that's the distortion that many religious people as well as non-religious people have about the Bible and the law or the Ten Commandments. These 10 words are more like the house rules. I mentioned the U.S. Constitution, which in fact is very man-centered and begins with we the people, but we have seen how the 10 words is God-centered and begins with, I am the Lord. You see the different orientation of how life is organized? And that should help us understand where this country or many other countries in the world are headed or going. Yes, we do live in this country, and yes, we are the citizens of this country, and some of us may have citizenships from other country or even dual citizenships. But we need to understand a kingdom or nation or a people group that's organized with a self-manifest destiny, and that begins with we the people, are missing a huge truth. That as human beings, when they do not recognize God, the Creator, or when the human beings act or live or function as if they are their own gods, what we see is the things that are happening in the world. Whether they be billionaires or autocrats, presidents, politicians, or celebrities. People who influence other people in a way for other people to follow and look up to them as they are, gods themselves. We have the warnings and the plain declarations of their destiny both in the Bible and in the world, in the affairs and the news of the world that you hear and listen and pay attention. But the good news that we are hearing, this is the good news that we want to tell people, our family and friends, is that the Bible or the law or the 10 Commandments, these 10 words, they show us a loving relationship, what loving relationship looks like between the Creator God and the creatures. Not just simply the creatures like different kingdoms of animals, but as the most treasured and most loved creatures called human beings. And what we find in these 10 words is that it helps us understand how to relate to the Creator and to other fellow creatures, other human beings. Is that clear as far as the 10 Commandments or 10 words? It helps us understand how we relate to God and how we relate to others. Okay, today we're going to look at the second word. It is a warning against idolatry. Exodus chapter 20, verse 4, God says, "You shall not have no other gods before me." Following verse 3, verse 4 says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything above, on the earth, the water below." It's basically saying from any visible creation. So what does this mean? Does this mean that God doesn't allow art? We are all sitting in this building. As you can see, we have a wooden crucifix. We have a butterfly that has a symbol, some kind of meaning, right? I'm sure you could arrive at a conclusion. We have these banners with drawings, circles, colors, and we have a drawing symbol of a fish with the Greek letter ictus. It's an acronym that stands for Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And why do we notice that the banners changing colors? So, are we in violation of the second commandment by having these images, symbols, and carpets, beautiful creations in the buildings that we occupy? The answer is no. Please do not misunderstand. In Exodus chapter 25, we read that the tabernacle featured images of cherubim. This shows us that God is not against art, symbols, drawings. God is the one who created beauty. If there is a person that appreciates beauty, music, art, who do you think that person may be? Jesus, right? The Son of God. So if you're an artist, professionally or at amateur level, in your heart, no matter what level, if you draw, for hobby, if you play music, no matter where you are, when you stand, you are given a beautiful gift from God that shows, that glorifies what kind of creator gave you those gifts. So through your practice of artistic abilities and giftings, at any level, you're reflecting God's image. So when we talk about images, when the second word talks about this creating of the image, carved image, we're referring to things that people bow down and serve. The word image is pesel in Hebrew, an idol of worship. It's an image that is created for the express purpose for you to pay attention, spend time, and spend energy, or even money, sacrifices. In the Old Testament, it's all animal sacrifice, and even extreme cases, human sacrifices. We heard from author R.R. Reno last week, who describes gods that people worship today. Quote, the strong gods are not the objects of men's love. The strong gods are the objects of men's love and devotion, the sources of passions and loyalties that unite societies. Why do people prefer idols instead of the true God? Idolatry always promotes control, comfort, and convenience. Today, we see this idol worship in a very practical way, and we call it the market. If you live in the Irvine or Tustin area, there is actually a marketplace by Jamboree and I-5. That's a big shopping center. The marketplace is not something new or modern phenomenon. Roman Empire, or even the ancient city of Rome, had a marketplace called Forum. If you visit Las Vegas, there are buildings or places that are named after it. It is a world where people make goods and services and market them in the most desirable ways. And that is why, all of us, most of us live in Orange County. We know what this means, right? Practically, all the shopping centers, whether it be Fashion Island in Newport or South Coast Plaza or Irvine Spectrum, we're surrounded by marketplaces. We have our being. We receive communications, all the materials, marketing materials, in print, online, advertisements. It's like we are living in the sea of market, like the fish that swim in the water. Our desire for these things is what drives the world. And you can understand your own idolatry by what things you pay attention to, spend money on, and care about. And I'll just demonstrate what the modern carved image idol looks like. All of us have this, right? In your pocket, in your purse. There's even a show called Black Mirror. It's a kind of a sarcastic show about how this captures our attention, time, and energy. And from time to time, you'll see accidents happen because drivers are looking at this. I happen to see even young people riding e-bikes holding onto this, and I'm like, wow. It's like they're doing some kind of acrobatic. They're holding onto the phone and they're riding their fast e-bikes. It's not just young people, old people as well. Why do I show this as a modern version of carved image? It's not the device itself that is an idol, but it is how you and I use it. These are all tools, right? Devices are all tools that are helpful. And if you know the story, more than 10 years ago, the world didn't know that your phone could do more than calling people or sending messages. And we're still in that world. But what it does is it brings all the tools to make our life convenient, easy, and helpful, and more. As I mentioned, it is what is drawing or making connection to our desire. So let me go through this simple list. These are the type of idols that existed in the ancient world, and some things that we actually see every day. So one is a idol of guarantee, a god in a box or a genie in a bottle. And if you have any background in marketing, if you studied marketing, the word guarantee is one of the favorite word, right? Results guaranteed. Or how about the phrase, it's all about you? There's an idol of selfishness. And don't get me wrong, okay, just because we take pictures with this device doesn't mean that we're all selfish, but what it does is it makes it very easy for us to be self-observed, right? I mean, it could be used as a mirror because it's got the functions where you can see yourself, but how do we know? And who's the person that will say, okay, it's enough looking at my face. It's been 20 minutes. We're talking about something that we use as a tool, but that's going beyond where it becomes an idol that captures our attention, energy, and time. So another word that is familiar with our culture that was back then was something that's easy. Ritual without righteousness. Can you think of a company that communicates this concept of easy? I could think of the car brand name Toyota. That's what they use. They make it easy for you, or Staples. Because people want things that are easy, because our life is difficult. So it is understandable why these values and qualities appeal to people. What goes with easy is convenient. Back in the days when the Israelites worshiped God, they were people who had shrines everywhere instead of one central location or sanctuary. Israelites were tempted to worship God at different high places, but God said, there's a temple in Jerusalem. I mean, we're kind of going ahead of ourselves, but when they were given instruction to build a tabernacle, a moving presence of God, it was a way for them to center their life on God's presence. But idols made it very convenient for people to worship God by having different shrines and places of worship, altars and honors. And if you actually travel to countries where Christianity is not dominant, I remember visiting Thailand, and these shrines and these altars and images, they're actually everywhere in businesses and the homes. As soon as you walk in, you could just see them. You greet them. There are gods and there are shrines. Sometimes people have these incenses burning. And there's a modern examples of these idols, images. I mean, they're almost like trinkets, right? But it's not just the object, how big or small they are, but it's the emotional connection. And as we have learned last week, it's about the attachment. And just like, it's normal for all of us to have these smartphones now, idolatry, idol worship was normal. That was normal for people back then. Everyone else was doing it. They have gods, goddesses. And by the time, we see the Greek culture dominate the Western civilization, we have a whole pantheon of gods. But even Greek pantheon of gods, they're not original. There are older ones, as I mentioned before, that goes back to Egypt, that goes back to Mesopotamia. The pantheon gods from ancient religions of Babylon. And not only those reasons, but also in Asia as well. In China, Korea, and Japan. And if you visit Japan, you probably have seen many shrines and temples of places of worship. And here's another thing that makes it very easy, that makes sense for people to worship idols, is because it makes sense. It's logical, right? Just like there are many different stores, we need many gods for many different needs. Human beings have many different desires. So you need a certain gods for certain desires or certain needs that you have. And we actually even saw Christianity adopt this model by having saints, right? I never was part of a Catholic church, but this is more of a hearsay, or you can kind of shake your head or no or yes. You pray to the saints and you call upon certain saints for different ailments that you have. If you suffer from some cold, I didn't do the research and I don't know the names, but I know that that's what they do. And it's the Catholic model of implementing what was practiced before. I'm not judging the church just because they do that, but what I'm drawing your attention is it is logical. People actually did that because it made sense. At their level, at our level, that's what we want, that's what we need. And the reason that the idol worship, the carved images were powerful is because it is pleasing. They are visible, they're beautiful, and they're also sensual. You all know, for those of us who have engaged with social media, we call it curated, right? You don't just take a picture and post it, right? What do? For those of you who are savvy with social media, you take pictures, and how many of you just post it? No, you actually look at the picture, and I know except for candid pictures, you edit them. Not only you edit the pictures themselves, you also think about what you communicate with your pictures or videos. They tell a story. And that's what people want. And some idols not only were pleasing, but they were indulgent. I think I mentioned this before, but how many of us love barbecues? Whether it's a southern barbecue, Korean barbecue, whatever barbecue. In the ancient world, worshiping God, idols involved sacrifices, right? Animal sacrifices. What do they do when they kill an animal? Do they throw the animal away? No. That's a time of feasting. And it's not just the meat. What usually goes with eating meat? Wine, right? So it's the feasting and drunkenness. And it's a party time. And do we have modern equivalents of that? Right now it's the month of October, full-on sports season. There's baseball playoff seasons on the way. Football, the national football, is happening. You got soccer. And whenever you actually attend the stadium, a game, that's what's going on. People are drinking, eating. And what's connected to is the ancient idols, carved images, often were in the forms of erotic depictions of gods. Doing the things that human beings thought would cause them to bless the human beings. So there were temple prostitutes, both male and female. Do you think the Israelites, it was easy for them to worship God and not have carved images? It was very hard. Just like we find it hard to gather every Sunday and listen to the messages, or not watch sports games, or not go and doing the things that we want to do. So let me ask you, which of these are the most attractive to you? You don't have to do the things that the ancient people have done. And now the modern idolatry is so high tech. All you need is phone, and if you pay attention to the development of technology, the companies they sell you glasses with computer that you could actually access all the things that are listed. Idols are not the things that people in the ancient world worshipped. Idols are everywhere, these carved images. I will just submit to you that they're not carved, but they are curated, digitized images or pictures that capture your time, your energy, and that invite you to be attached. When's the last time you experienced power outage at your home? Actually, it happened this morning. But actually, that will get people out of their rooms or out of their homes because they're concerned about all the modern conveniences that's enabled by the electric power not functioning. When's the last time you actually opened your phone and this is a tip. Go to settings and there's this feature called screen time. If you cannot find it, just search screen time. And it will tell you how many hours and how much time you spend on each app. Images of God. And that's who we are. Throughout history, people have interpreted the second word in different ways. Some people believe that it should be forbidden to create drawings, sculptures, or any other visual depictions of God. These people are called iconoclasts, people who are against religious images. So do not misunderstand. Just because I mentioned about the devices, smartphones, and many technologies during the message does mean that I want us to be, iconoclasts of the technology, or we go against technology, or we follow the examples of Amish people. I think I mentioned before where I had a chance to visit Amish town. They might be riding a horse-driven carriages, but they all have satellite dishes in their homes. That was my observation. So it doesn't matter. Whether you are far removed from the city or, as long as you have a device or connection where you can see the whole world, it defeats the purpose. I mean, what's the point of trying to not use modern conveniences outwardly and dress or live like Amish people when inside of your home, in the privacy of your home, you are connecting with all the things that we talked about? Why is this the case? Why do we have so many idols? The reason is it can be a shortcut to God's presence. Churches are not immune. I've been part of a church where we had a gathering in a football stadium, and I can tell you, emotion-wise, nothing compares. I was part of the pastors standing in the stage set up in the middle of the football stadium. And you stand there. I wasn't the one that was giving the message, but I was there. You look in front of you, tens of thousands of people sitting in front. There is an element, there's an awe-inspiring, there's a larger-than-life experience and moment that every human being experiences where it can become addicting. It's like, wow. And those of you who attended large events like concerts, any sports games, like that's where you are seated right in front of the action, you can kind of, share that experiences. And the reality, the truth is, that's actually how we're built, how we're made. We are made relationally. See, people might mistakenly think that the symbol of the cross has some kind of magical power. So you don't have to hide your cross necklace, okay? But I'm commenting on your emotional attachment to what you're wearing. Others might come up with the faulty idea of who God is or what He looks like. Throughout history, the church has occasionally imposed bans on artwork depicting God. And, I can be actually critical of even reformers. I feel like some reformers went too much, where they removed all the visible things and they have gone the other way of just abstract ideas of what God looks like when God has given us His Son, Jesus Christ, who was a human being. But even outside of artwork, there are all kinds of ways that we want a shortcut to God's presence. To summarize all the things that I've mentioned, it is really all about the encounter with the real God. All the large events, the things that appeal to our senses, it all point to our desire to connect with the real God. And sometimes this is what we see in churches that prioritize miraculous spectacles, special rituals, specific ideas, and strong emotions. You can be a church not actually using music. I have not worshiped in one of those churches, but one of my professors actually was part of a church where they sang just psalms without piano, without music, all a cappella. You call that exclusive psalmody church, where they pride themselves of getting rid of anything that is distracting or worldly. But I'm thinking, as some of my professors will also disagree, where music is a creation of God, and God did not condemn music or arts. And some Christians can go to the other direction of trying to remove everything. We can elevate a person, like a pastor or priest or theologian, as a perfect representation of God. I don't mean a disrespect, but Pope is that kind of figure where wherever he visits or wherever he leads, people will flock. Why do people do that? Because that is a religious idolatry where we fixate upon one person, feel like that person could get us close to God, or that person is a person that could speak on my behalf. Pope, for sure, is close to God than my dad or my mom or even me, because I don't think I pray as much as Pope. I don't think I'm holy as he. But where do these all thoughts and conclusions come from? The problem with carved images is that they are carved, made by human hands. We are worshiping something less than God and even something less than us. Idols are always fake, out of context, or simulated. So how do you interact with God? And how do you know if that is a true God or if it's just an image? And we know the answer. The good news is God has come, God has sent His Son to tell us what He's like and how you and I worship Him. Jesus expressed it in John chapter 4 in His conversation with the woman. Jesus said, God is spirit. You do not see Him. You do not try to understand Him by things that are visible. At Sinai, in Exodus chapter 20, Moses and the Israelites heard God's voice. Not only did they hear God's voice, they felt His presence by the earthquake, the clouds, the smoke. It's like a cataclysmic event where the whole earth is shaking. The grounds that they were on were shaking. That's the manifestation of God. God is, as a creator, is wholly other, and you and I cannot handle His presence. We really don't know what the creator God looks like. But we know and experience His presence. And God speaks to us in many ways, but most importantly, through His word. And that's what God has done with His people by giving 10 words. The real meaning of the word logos in Greek actually represents, it's pointing to Jesus. It's not just the intellectual aspect of human being, but it is the word through whom and with whom the world is created. As we see in John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. I'm not trying to elevate the intellectual aspect or intellectualism of the Christians to be more correct. No. This word that John's talking about is not just the rational aspect. It is including rational, emotional, as well as practical. It is relational, presence of God, embodied presence of God. And as Jesus himself said, if we see Jesus, then we see the Father. And Colossians 1:15 says, He is a perfect image of the invisible God. And as human beings made in God's image, we can also see God in our relationships with one another. First of all, we see God through His Son, Jesus Christ. And I know Jesus is not here. He's in heaven. And we trust that He was here 2,000 years ago as a Jewish carpenter, lived on the earth for about 30-some years. If you have any questions about that, I can answer those questions. And it's okay for you to have questions. And if you cannot believe those historical records, we can talk, because these are legitimate questions. But if you do believe that Jesus did live and He did exist and did come to earth, and if we understand Jesus as any other historical figure, historical person that we heard about, we know about, like Julius Caesar, right? Or other people that we believed existed, and that's how we worship God. Here's a very simple way of identifying what idolatry is, what the carved image is. It is anything that distracts us from the most important concerns of life. God, our relationship with God, and our relationship with others. So if your smartphone distracts you from being present and listening to your spouse or your children, then I would ask you to think about the carved image and ask, what does it look like for you to follow Jesus in a way where you do not let these tools to become traps? You do not let these created things hinder your relationship with the Creator. And just as Adam and Eve failed to do, where they let serpent dominate the conversation and for them to be tempted and go against God, what does your spiritual warfare or struggle look like? What are the things that we need to wrestle with? So if you want to stop worshiping idols, you can't just try to quit them. Because these idols are not bad things. The things that I mentioned, whether they be arts, music, even the other people, the things that we enjoy, food, hobbies, all the things. But what is the issue? The issue is when these things, your job, career, money, whatever that we live for, if they hinder us from growing in our relationship with God and with others. And that's when you can say, oh, I am worshiping an idol. I'm spending so much time, money, and energy in this thing. God is calling you to replace your idol worship with relationships. Yes. You might be thinking, well, I think my idolatrous relationship with this celebrity is like, I know what he does, what she does. You follow their story. They dominate your timeline or your screen time. I'm not talking about parasocial relationship where it's only one way. You know what that relationship is, right? Being infatuated. If the other person does not know you, let's say, okay, I follow Shohei Ohtani, right? He's the the star player of LA Dodgers. And I happen to run into him and I go, hey, Joey. And if he's like, who are you? Then that's not a relationship. And we really need to examine and assess how much of our time and energy is being spent in all these one-way relationships, and we get frustrated, become disappointed and discouraged and sad because we feel like nobody loves us. Idols cannot love you back. Even these real human beings, they don't know you. Well, I'm not saying they cannot know you and they can love you. They can, but again, it's about the shortcut, right? You cannot fast track a relationship. Some people can fall in love like this, like love at first sight, but some people, it takes time. We're talking about our relationship with God and our relationship with others. Some of us actually might have a hard time even revisiting your past. It's actually your relationship with yourself. When you're young, when you're single, or when you were married, when your kids were younger. When was the last time you actually thought about yourself back then? What were the emotions? Are there things that you just kind of left off and you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with that? What kind of relationship is God calling you to prioritize this week? And I'm thankful that we are here to prioritize our relationship with God, who is not seen, but whose voice that we can hear through His Word. And I want to invite you to listen to His voice and receive Him as we receive and celebrate the communion. Let's pray together.